Computer, okay. Good morning, salam alaikum to everyone. This program today, as every Sunday, we have two programs. Bob Crane will speak about Muslim citizenship in public square. And Safi Kaskas and I will speak about the ultimate citizenship, that is the Al-Amin at 2 o'clock. Please note, I wear three hats. As a Muslim, I speak, write, and talk about Islam. And as an American, much of my work is about pluralism in religion, politics, society, and the workplace, and defending the religious freedom across the world. Then I stand up for the rights of minorities in India as an Indian American. Now, this is a weekly program about, this program is Muslims Together, is about scouting and encouraging Muslims to run for public office and enticing them to join the media and volunteer serving the communities, all communities. The purpose of this Zoom meeting is to highlight the Muslim contributions towards the political, economic, social, and pluralistic landscape of America. Bob Crane, let me introduce Bob Crane. Bob Crane is the first Muslim American ambassador from the United States. He served as the deputy director of the National Security Council. He was the principal foreign policy advisor for President Nixon. Since the early 1980s, Bob has worked full-time as a Muslim activist. From 1983 to 1986, he was the director of Dawah at the Islamic Center of Washington on Massachusetts Avenue. He joined the International Institute of Islamic Thought, that is in Herndon, as its director of publications, and helped to found the American Muslim Council. In this capacity, Bob has been the founding president of the Muslim American Bar Association. His service to America is immeasurable. Now, Bob will speak about Muslim citizenship in public square, and he'll speak for about 20 to 25 minutes. Then we will have Q&A. Any questions you want to ask Bob about Islam in America or Muslims' role in America, he will answer. Bob, his floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The purpose of my talk today is to serve as the second session in addressing the 20 principles of Mike Rouse's Center for Pluralism for Muslims to Follow as guidance in practicing their religion. The first principle in this series of talks began last month in July 1921 with a talk on essence. This served as an introduction to my talk today on pluralism in the public square, because the possibility of the paradigm of thought known as pluralism depends on awareness of the paradigm known as essence. As an expert in artificial intelligence would be, I emphasize managing paradigms. A decade ago, I co-wrote with Professor Muhammad Ali Chowdhury a 2-volume textbook, now being expanded into 4 volumes, entitled Islam and Muslims, Essence and Practice. This highlights the concept of essence as the key to cooperation among persons in defining each one's personal identity, and as a key to building a cooperative identity among religions. This paradigm of thought, known as pluralism, also can benefit from introducing the paradigm known as the public square. Mike Rouse has entitled my talk today to include the term public square. This addresses the problem of the so-called practical politics, quote unquote, which can devolve into the simple question, how can I join the most powerful establishment and run the show? The concept or paradigm of thought known as the public square dates back to America's colonial times, before there were political parties, when the citizens of a town gathered as individuals in the local public square to discuss issues that affected them all in order to develop a consensus. This was the basis of the warnings by some of the Federalists at America's Constitutional Convention, who warned against the creation of political parties, because this, they warned, would result in the elevation of political power above and against the natural laws of compassionate justice. The term public square was adopted by Protestant Bishop Richard John Newhouse in 1990, who had converted to Roman Catholicism and founded the journal First Things as a Catholic interfaith journal motivated by public-spirited devotion to the general welfare independent of political parties. It was essentially libertarian, but without supporting the formal Libertarian Party. Some observers now agree, however, that it seemed to evolve during the years of Donald Trump as president into an outlet for his supporters, contrary to the original interfaith perspective of First Things, based on the principles of compassionate justice that constitute the essence of all the world religions.
Indeed.
Now, the next paradigm that I want to mention is, I call it peaceful engagement. In all discussions of interfaith cooperation in the public square, it is paramount to avoid the term tolerance, because the term tolerance can mean merely, I won't kill you yet. The higher step is called diversity, which can mean, however, I respect you, but we really don't have much to talk about. Finally, we have pluralism, designed as the basis for peaceful engagement in bringing out the best of one's own religion and identity in order to understand and cooperate with the best of other religions based on their common essence in seeking transcendent truth and compassionate justice. I won't have time to give quotes from the Quran. I thought I was supposed to talk for an hour, but see what I can do in 20 minutes.
Now, if you want to speak a little bit more, that's fine, Bob, because we'll have a Q&A that will prompt you to answer the questions.
Okay, yeah. All right. So when I talk about the Makasi, the basic principles, I'll do that in Q&A.
Perfect.
That's really a main part of what
Okay.
I want to talk about. Well, so then the next subject under this title about the public square is options to change the world based on the teachings of Islam and the public square. The first option is called the Benedict option. It's based on the monk Saint Benedict, who founded monasteries at the end of the Roman Empire in order to maintain the essence of Christianity against what then were regarded as heresies, which were spreading all over the world. Every bishop in Europe, for example, denied the Trinity. But I don't have time to go into that. I wrote a dissertation on that, on the political origins of heresy in the first Christian centuries. So the next option is not the Benedict, where you retire from the world. It's the opposite. It's the Franciscan option, based on St. Francis's order of monks who went out into the highways and byways of the world, calling out the good word from the housetops.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could say a lot about that, but I don't have time. The next one is what I call the Islamic option, which is to do both of those. It's difficult for a single person to be both Benedictine and Franciscan, but in a group, Muslims, I think, have to do all of those if we're going to bring about a world based on the essence of all the world religions. Now, the next subject I want to talk about is, it sounds very philosophical, is to distinguish between ontology, epistemology, and axiology from a Muslim perspective. Ontology basically is a science studying the ultimate transcendence, studying the human built-in ability to perceive the transcendence. This ability is found in all the great religions, including my own Cherokee heritage, which comes from the Mali Empire in Africa 700 years ago.
Wow. Bob, you'll be happy to know we have we make a full effort to have both women and men on the program. We have several women on the program today, and they will have some questions for you as well.
I happen to see Samira Saidi there. That's good.
Yes, Samira is
She's the
there.
world expert on this.
Sure, sure.
Um, well, in addition to ontology, we have what the philosophers call epistemology. Um, in my mind, that is the science of developing principles based on the ontology common to all religions. And I won't have time to go into that right now, but maybe in the period of question and answers, because uh, I've done a lot of work on this, the Maqasid al-Sharia.
Sure.
So then I will conclude my 20 minutes. I haven't been watching a watch, but
That's fine.
I'll conclude with my experience of what Islam is. In 1982, I was invited to found a monastery for Native American religions. A billionaire Canadian wanted to found a village of monasteries, each representing a different world religion. Well, two Buddhist monks had just come from Dharamsala to join and found a monastery, and they had 5 minutes before they had to be taken into town to a little village nearby in western Colorado to buy some supplies. And the billionaire who was running everything said, "Will you please entertain the Buddhist monks? You have 5 minutes." So the Buddhist monks heard that, and they say, "Well, we don't need 5 minutes to explain the essence of Buddhism." That was the question. My question was, can you explain in 5 minutes everything important in Buddhism? And they said, first we have Hinayana Buddhism, which emphasizes separating oneself from addiction to the material world. And once has accomplished that to some degree, he can advance, he or she, one can advance. I don't like people using he, she, so one can advance
It's a good one.
to Mahayana Buddhism, at which level one is aware of the ultimate. And they said, we have no word for that because words limit or constrict the meaning of what they are referring to, and one cannot limit or restrict the unlimitable. You call it God. And then once we reach this level, the person becomes aware of what it means to fulfill one's responsibility to bring about one's ultimate awareness into practice. And he said, therefore, at this level, one becomes aware of and committed to compassionate justice. And, I was quiet for a minute. I was dumbstruck. And I said, you have just defined in 3 minutes everything that is really essential in Islam. So that would be the conclusion of my introduction. And then I can go into the Maqasid al-Sharia, the principles that Muslims must develop and apply in order to fulfill their mission as Muslims, in order to bring out the essence of Islam and the practice in the social, political world.
Thank you, Bob. That's good, Bob.
Subhanallah.
Now, our friends, you're listening to Bob Crane. He's the first Muslim American ambassador. He served as the Deputy Director of National Security Council, and he was the principal foreign policy advisor to President Nixon. Now, I will ask Annie Zonival to talk about a little bit about MPV, that is Muslim Progressive Values, and also ask a question to Bob, whatever question she has on her mind. Annie?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Annie Zonneveld. I'm the founder and president of Muslims for Progressive Values. Robert, it was really mind-blowing and enlightening to hear you touch on these key principles and values and how you weaved it all together. I actually wish that we could have just 1 hour conversation on Maqasid al-Sharia, and as you noted in your last point, the application of it in our policy, our culture, and the way we actually live our lives. And just to touch on a little bit about Muslims for Progressive Values, or MPV, I founded it about 15 plus years ago here in Los Angeles, but it's gone national, it's gone also international. And I do a lot of work on human rights issues at the United Nations. So I also really work in the realm of policy and applying Maqasid al-Sharia at the policy level and at the grassroots level. And so I really smiled when you touched on Maqasid al-Sharia and its application. So the work some aspect of the work that I do also right now in Kenya is actually applying Maqasid al-Sharia in reforming the Qadi court, which is the Sharia court in Kenya, and making it more egalitarian, more human rights, more women's rights, especially compliant. And so my question to you is, in the scope of the work that you've done through decades and your understanding of Islam, this enlightened and human rights rooted Islam, there is the problem in the Muslim world is so vast, and it is as a result of disconnect of the intellectuals such as yourself and what the imams are preaching and teaching in the field at the community and the grassroots level.
Absolutely.
As a grassroots advocate and a human rights advocate, this is the constant battle that we're having. And how do we coalesce people like you and others in really bringing together that intellectual, but it's not keeping it at the intellectual level, because that's the problem, is that we need this knowledge to be the norm at the grassroots level. So how do we bridge that? I mean, I'm doing all that I can as a human rights defender and as a Muslim, but there is so much, a long way to go in making this Sharia, Maqasid al-Sharia as the norm. Any suggestions or collaboration, that would be fantastic. So yeah, just your thoughts.
Thank you, Annie. Bob?
Yeah, well, first we can address the maybe the essence of the problem, which was beautifully demonstrated when I was advising President Nixon for all during the 60s up until the election. I prepared 5 50-page position papers on each of the 5 foreign policy issues that we thought were the most important ones. And we actually put these together as a book, and the next president after Nixon wrote an introduction to it and said I can publish it, but he advised me not to. He knew, and I didn't, that President Nixon had appointed me as Deputy Director for Planning and Forecasting in the National Security Council. And he had also appointed wait a second.
She was wanting to know how to coalesce between intellectuals and the imams.
It's better if I don't use his name anyway. The head of the National Security Council. He fired me the next day because we disagreed on every important principle. I emphasized that the purpose of American foreign policy is to promote justice for everybody. And he was taught throughout his life with great success that the only purpose of American foreign policy is to pursue American power. So we were at complete opposite ends of every spectrum you can imagine. The good news is that he then became a student of artificial intelligence, just as I did, and I have been for more than half a century. And he put together 3 groups of scholars to forecast the future of artificial intelligence. And his conclusion was breathtaking. He said, artificial intelligence can end civilization forever because it is immune to ethics. And without ethics, there can be no civilization. Well, he made a complete turn from emphasizing the material and especially material power and ultimate purpose, which is transcendent. So
Now, coming back to uh, uh, Annie's question, how do we bridge the gap between what the imams know and what in the you speak?
Yeah, well, I think we have to educate the youth to the new era of intellectual thought, public relations that will grow up and is growing up under the influence of modern technology and especially artificial intelligence. People are already practicing it, trying to impose paradigms of thought from which people cannot escape. And the conclusions, therefore, are biased one way or another. It's important for the young generation of Muslims to understand that we live in a new world where technology, allied to human creativity, can pursue either good or bad. And it's important to distinguish for the young generation of all religions, all ethnicities, to distinguish in terms of basic principles what we should pursue in our life, social life, professional life, and in our own private life.
One of the things that I have suggested, Bob, to address Annie's question, if we can start a education program like a continuing education for imams, so they are updated with the current changes. For example, the Surah Nisa verse about beating the women that has been corrected by Dr. Lale Bakhtiar. Many imams even don't know about it. And
Yes.
there are a lot of things that have been corrected from the massive false translation. Those corrections are there, but the imams don't know. We need to start a education or a continuing education course where imams are constantly updated. Even Brother Ghamidi was not aware of this new development on that particular verse. So what do you say about starting a educational course for imams, continuing education?
I think it's absolutely essential. And this is one of the purposes of IQRA, International Islamic Quran Association, which was founded by Safi Kaskas, precisely for that purpose, to bring about, well, let's call it modern, maybe the modern isn't a good word.
Contemporary.
Yeah, enlightening understanding of the Quran, because the Quran is designed for all times, and therefore it must be interpreted within the context of changing times.
Exactly.
We know so much more now than we did 1,400 years ago. The Quran addresses that because it was designed for all times. Safi Kaskas has prepared a 2-volume translation of the Quran, and the second volume compares almost word for word the Quran with similar statements
Indeed.
in the Bible.
Yes.
And this, I think, is essential. It isn't just enough to, point out that there are 14 uses of the word daraba in the Quran.
Yes.
And 13 of them refer to separation, not to
Exactly.
We have to go beyond that.
Annie has taken a big task of communicating that to the general public. Annie, if you have a follow-up question, we will proceed to the other caller.
Yeah, I think it's not modernizing or contemporizing, but it's actually correcting the misogynistic interpretation. I mean, for me, I used to belong to a local mosque here, but upon rereading Islam for myself, it was such a revelation how social justice and human rights rooted it was, and yet that is not how we are practicing it. And so I think the idea of re-educating or updating or challenging the current norm of Daraba is one perfect example, but obviously there are many other problematic interpretations of Islam. When it's, for example, the term kafir, it doesn't mean infidel. On the issues of religious freedom, freedom of religion belief. I mean, this is also on the political realm, it's a bit challenging in the United States and how people, the conservative right and the conservative Muslim institutions are using the Religious Freedom Reformation Act, the REFRA, to justify discrimination in the name of religion. And as an American, I think this is really problematic when there is so much fusion of religion into the public space at this moment. And so I think it's important to have really strong positions about we as Muslims cannot have an Islam that is framed in the context of discrimination. It's unacceptable. And if we want to have a universalist interpretation, an inclusive and egalitarian interpretation of Islam, it has to start from us Muslims itself. And if we want to eradicate Islamophobia, we have to also eradicate this bias and unjust interpretation of Islam from within our community, because that is what is being used as ammunition against us. And
Absolutely.
so,
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I
I
have it.
yes,
Yeah, go
go ahead.
ahead.
No, Robert, it's go ahead.
Well, my comment would be, and it always has been for decades, we should not focus on Islamophobia. We should not focus on the un-Islamic thoughts and practices of Muslims who the Islamophobes use to attack the entire religion. By attacking the Islamophobes directly, we are popularizing what they're saying. We are then caught within their paradigm of thought, and it's better not to be in the defensive. We should be, I don't like the word offensive, but we should be proactive in teaching what Islam is, not on denying what it's not.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and particularly in an era of artificial intelligence, whoever can succeed in developing, I call it Islamic, I can't think of any better word, an Islamic framework for artificial intelligence will shape the future of the world.
Yeah. I have this question on ethics because you quoted this profound statement here is AI is immune to ethics, and without ethics, there is no civilization. That is such a profound statement that I think at the end of it, what is missing from many of the Muslim societies that I work in is ethics. And I mean, you talk about artificial intelligence, but I think without the ethics within our Muslim community itself, the moral compass of everything, it's really lost its direction, and I think that has a lot to do why the Muslim world is at the bottom of the list when it comes to human rights. This is the bottom of the list when it comes to development, and et cetera, or intellectual property or patents. And so I think there is a lot of work to do in the realm of love and compassion within Islam, because without love and compassion, we can't get to ethics itself.
Yeah,
Perfect.
and without ethics, we can't get to compassion either.
Yeah, I taught a class, a master's program at a university in Bern in Switzerland 2 years ago on ethics in Islam, and I think as I'm a lot of times I'm usually the only Muslim in a space, like ethics like human rights or LGBT rights, and it's and for me to speak on the issue of ethics and in the context of Islam and Maqasid al-Sharia, it really does a lot of people, non-Muslims, can't wrap their head around it. It's like, how can you still be Muslim and be so rational and be so ethical, right? So.
That's a good thought, Annie. Bob, after you, I will ask Soraya to speak for a second. Go ahead, Bob.
Say that again.
Your response to Annie about ethics, to wrap around non-Muslim
my
wrapping
final-
around the head of ethics.
Yeah, my final words on that. Yeah, well, I will emphasize my interest in study all my life from the time I was a small boy of the Cherokee traditionalist religion. My great grandmother, who helped raise me, spoke Cherokee as her native language, and her son, who was my hero, was the leader of a movement in 1905 to 1907 to demand freedom of religion and self-government for all of the indigenous nations, the First Nations in America. President Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, in 1905, officially abolished the Cherokee religion and the Cherokee government because he said they are uncivilized. He defined civilization as governed by an order of law that brings stability. And he said the Cherokees have no system of law to impose or maintain stability. And of course, they don't. They have a system of jurisprudence to bring out compassionate justice.
Indeed.
So by definition, what we're talking about, and even the way Islam is sometimes practiced, is a cause of civilizational collapse. We have to bring out the inherent teachings which come from, I think, from awareness of Allah. Every person, put it this way, every person is created with a unique purpose in life.
Yes.
So every person's task in life is to try to figure out as best one can what this purpose is.
Yes.
And one's purpose is to become the person that one was created to be.
Great. Thanks, Bob. We have a few. Soraya, you got a question?
Oh, do I have a question?
No, Soraya, our guests.
Yes.
Soraya, you have a question?
Thank you, Mike and Robert. So glad to be here. Is that me? The reception is so weak. And Ani, thank you for your insightful comments also. You know, I really don't know where to begin because I come from a very different space. I don't sit in boardrooms and I don't sit in lecture halls. I work at the grassroots with the margins. I live, listen, and learn from the women. And the disconnect between the text and the context and what our religious leaders preach is enormous. We are in a severe conundrum. I don't even know where we can begin. For instance, I mean, Robert, you spoke about ignoring what the Islamophobia and focusing in what is good. And speak for the greater good. And that's a powerful thing, but who is going to do it? How many of us are going to do it that we will be heard? And I know we have activists here and there and we do our work, but we still lack that collective consciousness. So my work is essentially focused about bringing together women, training them to understand that there's a huge difference between the text and the context. You know, I was once at a meeting and the Jewish rabbi said, every one of us have to be embarrassed about some things our religion says. And I don't think the Muslims will ever are willing to recognize that. We say Islam is designed for all times, and we must interpret within the context. But we put a huge period with designed for all times. Our religious leaders are not qualified to teach. They might know the text, but they have no understanding of the context. So I think beginning with the training them is highly critical. I remember I'm from Sri Lanka and I do lots of work in Sri Lanka, and I know the pulse and I know the culture and I know the women. So if Sri Lanka in the 50s, in the 1950s, had an international interfaith conference, and where leaders from all over the world assembled for the conference.
Sorry, can you ask the question?
Yeah, the question is, so they came for the conference, but they were told, go to the villages. There's no conference. Go to the villages, live with the villagers for a week and come back. And what they came and reported was the villages were focusing on what to eat next, where is the food coming from, where is the job, how can we treat our women better. So such a movement is critically important. And how can we bridge that gap, Robert? How can we bring that training and teaching to our imams when we have imams who are conversant in the text but not in the context? How can we reopen the Muslim minds? Are we going to do it through the imams?
I have a very simple answer to that. Based on the culture in all of the First Nations in America, when it comes to your identity, if you're being deliberately destroyed, when the policies of the Bureau of Indian Affairs are focusing on destroying one's identity and re-educating children so that they have no concept of anything other than being secular, the force which always seeks to win out and does win out are the women. It's remarkable, I think, that the men don't really have a commitment to identity survival. It tends to be more secular, whereas the women understand identity. I mean, that's where children come from, after all. I think it's inherent in women. Some people say you shouldn't say anything is inherent in women, not inherent in men, but I would say it's more inherent in women to revive and preserve the essence of our religions, our essence around the world, the essence of everyone's religion, and I would say especially in Islam as a model for the other religions of the world. Our future is going to depend on I don't know how to describe it, but it's the commitment to preserving not anything physical, but to preserving the ultimate identity of every human being. That's just that is the teaching of the Cherokees, which derives in part from the teaching of the Confederal empire in Africa, which sent ships over to the United States. And Samira Saidi can brief you on that. She's by far the world's expert on it. And she has written a recent book chapter on matrilinealism, which includes also the role of women in cultural promotion.
Friends, you're listening to Bob Crane, an expert on Islam. And now Victor Ghalib Beg has a question. I think he knows you, Bob.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Victor?
Assalamu alaikum. Bob, how are you?
Yeah, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
It's been a long time. I think it was in the 90s when you were also involved with the late American Muslim Council, the first.
Yeah, the early 90s, 92, I think, is when it was founded.
Correct. So.
And it represented, this was the official representative of Muslims to the American government.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you were on the board or not. I was on the board. I'm sorry, I didn't turn the video on because I look better in the picture.
No, I was at one point the director of publications for the IIIT.
Right. So
early 90s.
yeah, well, that's the story of a community. Sometimes, we build organization, then.
No, actually, it was in the mid 80s. Yeah, go ahead.
Right.
Victor, your question?
Yeah, I'm going to ask the question. My question, before I ask a question, I just want to agree with you regarding what you said about Islamophobia. And I also agree with not to dwell so much about all the problematic issues we may have with our community leaders or imams or whatever. We are a big tent. We need to accommodate and live with everyone. If that's how they believe, that's their belief. So I just want to say I agree with you on that. My question is, is spirituality is as compared to Sharia. I don't know. You've written much on Sharia. The emphasis on spirituality needs more attention. That is, so that is something that unites all of us, and that's really what is average American or average person in the world is looking for, because they have a spiritual disconnect between the material world and the spiritual world. So I want to get your thoughts on that. The other thing is, as far as having the progressive values, I think that also needs a definition, because sometimes, if we are in direct conflict with some of the rules, like, for example, I fully believe in LGBTQ rights. My neighbor, lesbian couple, and I'm really, I have, I live here in Florida. When that thing happened in, by the way, I'm sure you got my memoir. I think Al-Amin has given you from Islamic City. I mentioned.
Oh, yes.
So,
Victor, your question for
yeah,
Bob.
I want to get to the question, because in the context, I just want to give a blunt question. So I just want to clarify that, I'm very much involved in interfaith work. And when that thing happened in Orlando, I was invited to speak to 1,000 people, a lot of them gays and lesbians there, of course. So anyways, I think when we talk about civil rights and what they have as they don't want to call it a way of life, but whatever, it is, it's their right. However, getting to the gay marriages and stuff, I think that comes into direct conflict with what our faith stands for.
Would that be your question, Victor?
Those are my questions.
All right, Bob, go ahead, answer the Bob.
LGBTQ marriages, spirituality as part of, the Sharia that is more emphasized, especially with our imams. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Victor.
I would say spirituality is the absolute core, and it comes in the first of the 8 maqasid that I identify, which is haq-ad-din. Haq is, like many Arabic words, has many meanings, and one, it means what the Christians call God, and one is truth, ultimate truth, and the other is human rights. That haq covers all of that. And then there's 7 other that I don't have time to go through, but it starts with that. And so your question concerns, I would say, the role of spiritual awareness. And I would say my own conclusion is that almost half of all Muslims in the world either are Sufis or are in groups that are not organized as Sufis, but basically are. I once attended a meeting, when was that? whenever it was, 85, I think, I was lived in the home of Samahatu Sheikh Ahmed Guftaro in Damascus in Syria, editing a collection of his writings and speeches around the world. I consider him the 20th century's leading interfaith leader. And he took me with him to a meeting in Tripoli, to Libya, of 100 Sufi orders. And almost none of them had ever heard of many of the others. But they had a chance to interact. And of course, this is fascinating for me. And I was interested in the fact that there are so many spiritual leaders, open spiritual leaders in Islam, but people don't really know about it. And many Sufis like to remain separate, like what did we call it? The approach to life where you hide. Many of them do that. I don't think they should hide. And the ones who grow, I think, are the ones who are more open to the Franciscan approach. There were some Sufi orders there among the 100 that were dying, and there were some that were growing. And the Qadri was growing faster than all the others, because when the people dropped out of a sort of an uninspiring Sufi order, they joined the Qadris.
Yes.
This is just
Bob, how would you address Victor's question about the gay and lesbian marriages?
Oh, well, I think the problem is people who will not accept the reality of personal identity, and they will invent artificial identities, or they destroy their own identity. They're living in a dream world. They're denying reality and claiming that it is reality. So I think we have to address that head on. I really don't know about the psychology of heterosexuals and so forth. So I'm not a scientist. I can't say anything about that. But to raise that to a level of wokeism, I invented the term wokeism to describe the current obsession with denying reality. We have to counter wokeism by teaching reality. Very simple.
Thank you, Bob. Samira Saidi has a question.
Yes.
Samira, please go ahead.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum. Dr.
Walaikum
Mike, Dr.
assalam.
Crane.
Oh, you were on the Chichen Itza?
Oh, yes,
Oh.
I was. That's what I told you last time. I was there a few months ago.
Yeah.
In, I think it was on March.
I was on the top of that building with Mayan leaders, and we prayed interfaith prayers there. Sorry, go ahead and ask.
Normally, if I put myself aside, I'm somewhere in the rear, in the background.
Okay.
If you want to see it. But anyway, my question is, my conclusions first. I noticed during my years of research that Houston, we have a problem with our Muslim scholars, not only with imams, because they have stopped putting into question and interpreting the Quran as Muslims and as scholars who are supposed to make researches in each and every field in order to understand verses as simple as the one related to the fact that the Prophet Muhammad والسلام, and the Quran had been revealed to the worlds. And I don't understand, and I did not understand the reason why the Muslim scholars have rejected the possibility that the Quran had been revealed also to the peoples of America. They have only started to think about it. And how do you explain that the Muslim scholars have at this level thoughts of the Quran as the Christians would have?
Bob,
Well, yeah, I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
Samira,
Because, well, yeah, because as Muslims, the Muslim scholars have enlightened the world, and they have been far away in each and every field, in scientific fields, for example. But as to the reality regarding the fact that the natives of America had also received the revelation regarding Islam and regarding Muhammad, they have not thought about it as a possibility, but have only imagined that it was just impossible, and they, instead of making their minds work, they just relied on what the Christians said about it, that it was impossible, and that the New World had been discovered in 1492.
Yeah, I understand your question. I think, why have the Muslim scholars bought into the Western false history whereby there was never any spiritual understanding in America until Christopher Columbus arrived, and they claim that the Africans, the Mali Empire, both from the north and the blacks in the south, had a very advanced confederal system which existed in America because of two great expeditions that went out in 1310, 1312, and arrived at what the Cherokee religions call the land where it never got cold, and brought the book. The Cherokees and their antecedents for the past 700 years have known that all the details of Islam. They start every prayer with Ya Allah. My great uncle was a trained religious leader, and he was my hero. As a kid, as a 5-6-year-old kid, it impressed me particularly that he knew the names and purposes of more than 100 plants.
wow.
And he was an expert in an era of a kind of reality that nobody that I knew anything about. And it is amazing that Islamic scholars are blindsided by what they hear and read in American universities, whereby Islam was never in America, and yet there is evidence that Muslims have pioneered intercultural exchange with both South American and North America for many hundreds of years, if not even thousands of years. But American, not American, Islamic scholars in general are not aware of this.
Yes.
And I think it's high time that they start learning a non-Western beholden history.
Right.
You are a revolutionary historiographer. We need more of you. And if we want to educate the young people about the history of Islam, we better go beyond the existing imams. We need
I think so.
we need to have a continuing education course for everyone. If anybody has question, please raise your hand and feel free to ask question. We'll go for our program was supposed to be ending at 1. We will take, with Bob's permission, another 10 to 15 minutes to ask other questions. Please raise your hand. Bob, my question to you, the new phrase, okay, go ahead, ask. Mohsin, please go ahead and ask your question.
I just was reading yesterday that Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia has said that none of the hadiths should be taken into account. and that we strictly should adhere only to the Quran, while in the culture and in the Muslim thought, which I have been brought up, and I'm sure most of you have been brought up, he has always said is the Quran and Hadith form an essential part of the essence of Islam. And then also I understand the Imam or in charge in Egypt also hasn't come in support of it. And so I was just wanted to find out, I do not know the answer, and it is very confusing at this juncture with the religious thought which we have been brought up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohsin.
Well, it doesn't confuse me at all. The Hadith are a very valuable addition to the Quran, but they are valid only to the extent that they agree with the Quran. Unfortunately, a large number of the Hadiths were artificially invented by some sultan or another, like stoning women to death, which is law in 6 Muslim countries today. It is based on one Hadith. I've forgotten the details, but he said the Prophet said that immoral women should be stoned to death. Well, computer analysis, which has helped a lot in making sense of the Hadith, reveals that the guy who supposedly heard this from Omar radiallahu anhu was 2 years old at the time when Omar died. So that eliminates that Hadith. Many Hadiths are being deleted now because it is clear that they're isnad, like most Hadith, the isnad is not reliable. But for a Hadith used for Islamic Sharia, the requirements for authenticity are much, much higher. And I just think we need to I think we need to emphasize the Hadith just as much as before, but with a clear understanding that their legitimacy has to come from the Quran, not just from somebody who said something or other.
That is a good point, Bob. I think we have Annie has a question. Then we'll have Samira and Soraya.
I'm originally from Malaysia, and I was not raised on a hadith, alhamdulillah. and yes, if the hadith contradicts the Quran, I just basically set it aside. My question, Robert, you had said that you wrote a paper when, as a deputy director for under Nixon, in recommendations on the trajectory of the foreign policy for that administration, that it should be in the direction of promoting human rights and justice. And you said that, was it published or not? And if so, I would love to get a copy of that.
It never was published. It should be. I've often thought about it because it was a whole book. It was a 250-page book. Everything I said in that is valid today.
Is it available in PDF format, Bob?
Can I get it, please?
Is that available in PDF format?
No way. No. As a matter of fact, I would have to go through half a dozen more, probably a dozen filing cabinets, even to find it.
Robert, I would highly recommend that you please make it public, and it would be such an important document. I cannot stress that enough as someone that works in that realm
Well, it is historical because Jerry Ford, who then became president after Nixon, wrote a very good long introduction to it. It was well known at the time of the election in 1968, but Kissinger really took over the election, and even down in Miami. he denies that he ever had anything to do with policy or with Nixon down in Miami. But he organized the opposition to I'm 92 years old, so I forget names. I can think, but I can't remember. but at any rate, you're right. This should be reproduced as a historical document. Right.
And Bob, that is we appreciate you that. Thank you. Now Samira has got a question.
Okay. She has no end of questions. That's why she's pioneering historiography.
No, in fact, I had raised my hand before for the previous question. I don't have any more questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Samira.
Thank you.
If somebody else has got a question, please ask. If not, I will be asking some questions.
Well, I have, okay, go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
Let me introduce myself. My name is Okola Rashid. I'm the co-founder and president of the International Museum of Muslim Cultures, and I do not know how this email for this wonderful program got into my email inbox. I am just so excited to be a part of this presentation. As soon as I got the email on yesterday, I started to research Dr. Crane and who he was. Who is this person that's done these things? I don't know him, but we have America's first museum, the International Museum of Muslim Cultures, that's dedicated to educating the American public about Islamic contributions. And we just established this Islamic Thought Institute that really works with grassroots people, bringing scholarship to grassroots people to really help to move in this contemporary space that we're in. And I really would like, my question is that I would like to, we're developing collaboration partners through our Islamic Thought Institute to really get the information. This kind of information is up there somewhere, right? It's not down here. We don't have that. And so a part of what we attempt to do is to try to bring that information to the general public and engage the public for social justice kinds of work and activities.
What would be your question, Okola?
My question is, I would like to partner with the Center for Pluralism, and I would like to have, I guess this that you sent me, I don't know if this is your direct email, but I would like to follow up with you.
Please do. Please do. We'll be happy to do that.
I would like to engage with Dr. Crane as well.
Thank you very much.
I've never heard of your organization, but it's exactly the type of organization that should be working together with organizations like My Houses and Safi Kaskas. We also should be reaching out to other organizations because there is strength in numbers.
Sure. If you have any more question.
Yeah, I had a quick question.
Please do, make it quick.
Robert, have you been the best kept secret in the community? I don't know. It's music to my ears to hear what you're saying, especially coming from a male. And Okolo, as you know, Mike does phenomenal work, the Center for Pluralism. I'm so glad you're going to partner. He is a relentless pursuit of justice and a humanitarian Islam. So my question is, I mean, there's the Islam we were raised, there's the Islam we practice in the United States, and there's the Islam that's been practiced the world over. There's a huge disconnect. And I think a powerful place to begin, because I work on the ground in Sri Lanka, this Hadith culture has destroyed Islam, and bringing that bit of common sense that the Hadith does not conform to the Quran, question it. We know it, but we are afraid to question, because in the community, what we are looking for is uniformity, not unity. This has ruined us as a community. But because of people like you are also raising the voice, it gives us grassroots activists more power. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate your work. And also Mike.
Thank you.
Well, may Allah bless you. Fi aman Allah.
Friends, you are listening to Bob Crane. He's the first Muslim American ambassador He served as the Deputy Director of National Security Council. He was the principal foreign policy advisor to President Nixon. We got another 5 to 6 minutes. We'll conclude it. Bob, if anybody has a comment, quick comment or a quick question, please raise your hand. If not, I will ask my question to conclude the program. Bob, my question to you is the new phrase that we have started working on, Islahul Alam, that is restoring harmony in the world. And that is the intent and purpose of Islam. So can you talk a little bit about it?
Well, I will rely on you. You invented the term, and I agree with what it appears to say. I could probably write an article on what I think it means.
Please do. Please do. It would be worth it.
It's part of the Pluralism Project.
Indeed.
Which I think is something new in Islam, really something new in the world, because it's needed. And I think Allah provides what's needed when it's needed.
Yes.
We just have to recognize that Allah has perhaps appointed us to do what we can in promoting a world of, well, it's not submission to Allah, but it's more than submission, love of Allah. That's what we're here for.
Thank you, Bob.
And to spread Allah's love for the rest of the world.
Sure. Somebody has a question. We will conclude.
Yeah,
real quick, please.
Yeah, following up on Bob's comments, okay, there are a lot of hadith. Everybody is quoting hadith. For an ordinary human being who's not a scholar, how do we know which is connected to the Quran, which is not connected to the Quran? Because everybody is quoting from all over the place. So somebody like Muhammad bin Salman getting on and saying something, and then don't we need some research or something to dissect or find out which are really valid sort of hadiths versus those who are not? Otherwise, as a lay person, I don't know. I go and listen to the Imam and he quotes me the hadith. I believe what he's saying is correct.
Thank you, Mohsin. Bob?
I've studied the writings on the hadith, and we fail to distinguish among the isnads. There are some that have basically no isnads. There's some that have a weak isnad, and most of them are weak. But then there are those that have a very strong isnad, and this has been preserved for the maqasid, for developing what I use is the 8 highest principles of the maqasid. But I would need another hour to go into that.
We will do a program on that, on Sharia. I think we need to do a program on Sharia because that is, I think, them. Thank you very much, friends.
I share this book about hadith because Mohsin was asking about it, and I think this is a real issue that has bastardized the interpretation of the Quran.
Yes.
And it's not hadith. Mohsin, if you can see,
I can
type
see.
it. Okay.
That is a good book to read.
Yeah, and it's a compilation of writings, and it's actually by members of the Muslims for Progressive Values community. We've got a real bunch of intellectuals, and so they've put together this book at their own, on their own efforts. And so I would recommend that if you want to.
Thank you.
Did you get it, Mohsin? Did you get it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mohsin, I will send you the email about that book. And I have written a comment on the back of the book as well. Thank you very much, friends. We got the next program starting in 30 minutes. And that program is about the ultimate citizenship. That is the concept of, from an Islamic perspective, Safi Kaskas and I will speak about what does it involve by calling Al-Amin. what does it make sense to American Muslims to be the best citizens in the world, and what does it take? What does Al-Amin mean? So we will start that program at 2, and I think you have the link in the second link of the links I have sent. And with this, Bob, you want to say a few last words, and we will conclude the program.
Oh, my last word to conclude the program is very simple. Fi aman Allah.
Thank you, Bob. And I request everybody to, if you have time, to join the next program at 2. It is about the ultimate citizenship. What does it mean? Al-Amin, what does it mean? What does it involve? What do you have to be in Al-Amin? That is the foundational sunnah of Islam. That's where Islam began. We have to have the foundation to be the best Muslim in the world. Thank you very much for everyone. Fi amanullah, as you say, Bob. Salam alaikum to everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Mike, for having us.
And
Thank
this
you, Mike.
program will be on
Fi amanillah.
Fi amanullah. This program will be on YouTube. If you just go to YouTube and type in Muslims Together, our Center for Pluralism, you will have it. Thank you.
It was such a
Thank you.
pleasure, this conversation, and thank you, Robert Crane. It was excellent to discover you.
It really was. It was really eye-opening, and we're so grateful. And I would like to just add really quick that if Mike's book is really the best thing to help Muslim Americans find their center. It's really wonderful and helpful.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate
Really
that.
good.
All right. And I have to prepare for the next program, so we will conclude it. Thank you so much.
Bye,
Fi
everyone.
amanullah. God bless all.
Bless you.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate you. I'll send you the link.
Okay, good.